Hello, everyone, to another edition of Dissolving the Divide. This is Leslie Powers. Hey, Derek. And we have a great guest here, David Greenberg, who's been one of our, journeymen in the natural law movement, sharing a lot of wonderful information about natural law, and he's expanding his repertoire of teaching, and so real excited to have him here to talk about this next phase of work that he's sharing with the public. Hey, Derek, do you got anything to share before we get
Oh
going?
yeah, a little bit, just real quick, and yeah, David, we've all been in network or friends on Facebook and all that for a couple years now, and loving to see the progress of everyone's work and all that. I love your professionalism behind things and your push beyond just simple content creator stuff. Obviously, you have a really interesting background of what you've done and what you worked for and all that, and then yeah, honing in all those skill sets into like truth speaking, natural law, and really getting folks towards the idea of like, hey, there's actual requirements and criteria and different ways to see freedom that the mainstream is giving us and spoon feeding us and all that stuff. So yeah, it's really great to have you on. And we're speaking about common law, which is can be kind of confused or misconstrued with natural law sometimes. I've even spoken with people in person when I was back in California for a little bit. So yeah, you have a new website coming up, or that is up, sorry, and you have courses that you're currently going. You had something yesterday, for example. So yeah, if you want to tell us a little bit about that, and who you are, where you're from, and all that good stuff, my man. Yeah, David Greenberg. How you doing, brother?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Derek, for that intro. And also, Leslie, thanks so much. It's great to be here with both of you guys. And I love your show. I love what you guys are doing. Um, and I'm definitely a fan. So it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah. So, we've been part of this community, the One Great Work Network, for example, and that's essentially, I think, how we've connected. And we probably haven't, I don't think we've had conversations until now. So uh, this is going to be kind of exciting for me, I'm bringing some enthusiasm because it's the first time we're having this conversation. So a little bit about me. In many ways, I was kind of just an ordinary person for many years. In fact, you could even say I had a relatively low, or what you could call a degraded level of consciousness. I was not very integrated. And that the way that showed up in my life is I didn't take very good care of myself. Um, Made a lot of mistakes in different realms, financial and otherwise, relationships, struggled and suffered. And then it just kind of all came to a head with the scamdemic, plandemic, right? When with the new era, this kind of awakening, which these things always serve as a catalyst to awaken. We can look at them negatively, but there's always, there is a benefit in terms of consciousness. So for me personally, the benefit was my suffering reached a point where it was just unacceptable. And I was just ready to learn something different in order to extricate myself from the hole that I had essentially dug for myself. And that's how I came across natural law. And the way I learned about it is I somehow or other, Mark Passio came across my YouTube feed. First, it was just some video of his. And then somehow that got me to seeing his natural law seminar, the one from about 11 years ago. And that thing just blew my mind every way to Sunday. Like it was literally, my response was, why am I only discovering this now so late in my life? But better late than never. So a lot of things made sense. A lot of dots were connected. A lot of struggles suddenly in context, brought clarity to me in terms of my own life. And I immediately started to take action. Like I was basically all in almost from the beginning. And I started watching the podcasts, and then I kind of took Mark's message to heart. Don't just be an armchair, don't just be an armchair philosopher, actually get out there and do things. And I've kind of always had that. I had already started creating videos before this. So I think that's probably why I was able to jump in as a content creator a little more easily, because I had already been doing it, but in a different context. And I had already kind of enjoyed the process of getting on camera. So I was over any, fear that I might have to show up on camera, stuff like that. So I kind of embraced it wholeheartedly, and but I was kind of bitter in the beginning because, again, my why did nobody in my life tell me this stuff?
The rude
So,
awakenings, yeah, man.
yeah. Why did I find out about this so late? And and from, as Mark likes to call himself, some punk from Philadelphia,
Mm,
right? You
yeah.
know,
And you realize there is a schism and a divide between, the people who understand or unnatural law and those that don't, right? Yeah.
exactly. So, but I embraced it, and I started to see a lot of benefits, and things started to shift for me in different ways. And just out of the blue, I got an email from Mark to be invited onto as a content creator. So, and then that just fueled more enthusiasm. So I was really pumping out a lot of videos. It was about 2 years ago, and then kind of upping the quality, as we talked about during the pre-show. I wanted to keep upping the quality of the videos and really enjoying that. But somewhere I was still frustrated because despite all this positive, revelation, despite this knowledge and having some improvements in certain aspects of my life, and particularly financially, it just continued to be a struggle. And I thought about that not only in context to myself, but I kind of looked at people in the network always struggling, asking for donations, never, something just didn't sit right with me. And it just didn't make sense. I felt like, again, I had that same feeling like I was still missing something. Right. So that's what fueled me to continue doing my research. And I do consider myself, among other things, a researcher, because I'm always researching. That's really never stopped. I think in order to be a true student of life, of natural law, of all these things, one of the attributes that we want to embrace is that we're always learning. And I'm sure you guys and your audience embrace that. So
For
I
sure.
just I consider myself a researcher. So I continued. So having this question in mind, what 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 can we practically do to end debt slavery and financial burdens in context to natural law, and knowing that natural law is a thing and that we live in a world with natural laws. Um, how do we actually practically make that happen? And in a similar manner to when I discovered natural law, the information started to show up, and it showed up through someone in the community. I'm trying to remember the exact threading, but somehow or other, I got introduced or maybe reintroduced to common law, but specifically to certain concepts related to common law, such as conditional acceptance, which is now the foundation of what I'm doing. Um, and I realized that I myself, the reason that I had resisted learning all this was I was resisting it for a couple of reasons. One is when I learned natural law, I don't want to badmouth anybody in the community, but there is a tendency to kind of like throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, we live in a certain financial system, but if we just say the whole system is immoral, let's just throw it away. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because we're all using the system, right? And is that really true? Or is it a system that could go either way? Could it be used morally versus immorally, rather than just saying the whole system is immoral? So I kind of threw that away. And also with common law, I had kind of taken the mindset, well, if natural law is the ultimate law, like, we can just ignore all of man-made laws. Now we can, but the truth is that again the same, committing the same error of throwing out the baby with the bathwater? Is there a foundation? Is common law actually based in natural law, which I have concluded that it is. And
Mm.
that's why common law has force, because it's simply a reflection of natural law. But when you have this mindset of, I don't need to look into that, see, that's not a healthy mindset as a researcher. So I realized that. So I realized that I had been getting in my own way, but once I released that need to do that, then all this new information just started flooding in. And I got very, very enthusiastic again, because it was like a breath of fresh air and a whole new, reboot of my enthusiasm for it.
Can you give us just a few basic definitions, maybe, of what common law is? How you would define the law, like man's law versus common law versus natural law in simple terms.
Sure. Yeah. I think the way that I describe it is that common law is essentially a largely oral tradition that just explains objective morality, and it codifies natural law and objective morality in a way that it's a very simple, practical system that allows us to build communities and interact and build, and live in communities and deal with the things that are going to come up, moral issues that are going to come up in community by having a very few simple rules that even a child could learn and that can be passed on mostly orally because it's very simple. We can talk about the codification, but that's what it is. It's simply a man's implementation of natural law in society.
Looking it up, they describe it as a precedent, like using precedents. And I'm wondering if the way you're approaching it is a little different than maybe how, like looking up the common law system, online real quickly before, it's a judicial precedent or judge-made law, a body of law derived from the judicial decisions of courts and similar tribunals. But I think you're describing it a bit differently than that.
I don't embrace that definition. I think there is
Uh-huh.
a version of common law that matches that definition, but that's not the totality of it. So
Yeah.
common law is basically there are 4 tenets to common law, and this is going to sound very familiar to people who've studied natural law and know about objective morality. It's going to resonate, I think. So the first rule of common law is cause no harm, injury, or loss. Right. The second rule is always be proportionate and what's the exact wording? Always act in proportion to the circumstances. So what that means is sometimes you have to cause harm, but it's in proportion. So if you're defending yourself and to stop someone from attacking you, you end up breaking their arm. Well, you did cause harm, but that was in proportion to the circumstance. So you are okay. You didn't violate the first rule. And secondly, if a doctor needs to, for example, do surgery on a person, they're going to have to break their chest open, perhaps. That is causing harm. But again, they're working to save their life. So it's in proportion. So the rule number 2 is we always act in proportion to the circumstances. The third rule is always be honorable in your contracts, in your agreements, truthful in your word. Don't be deceptive when entering into agreements. Because to live in society, this is why it's so important for building society and communities, is we're interacting. Well, if we can't be true to our word, if we can't be relied upon and trustworthy, what are we? What can we offer people? Really not much. So that's why that one is so important. And then the last one is almost like restating the first one in a different way, is that your rights end where someone else's rights begin. Right? So just respecting the boundaries between us and not infringing or trespassing on other people's rights. Because in common law, we use that term a lot, like you're trespassing on someone's rights, not just on their physical property.
Yeah, those are excellent foundational principles, right? All based on natural law. So what have you found as to how we can, practically implement these guidelines into the man-made system that we're up against?
Yeah. So the first thing is similar to the awakening that goes through shadow work, and it's kind of an extension of that. You have to be willing to look yourself in the mirror and say that I've been fooled, I've been duped, I've been deceived, and there's a lot of deception going on. But like all systems, there is a version of the financial system that can potentially work. Whether it's the same thing we have now or something new, I don't know, because I'm just one person. But there is a correct understanding of how it all works. The problem is that we have been duped, and I think one of the main reasons that people have been duped. Oh, I mean, there are many reasons, perhaps, but we aren't really honest with ourselves, and we can often be lazy. We don't read the fine print. We don't really understand what we're agreeing to, because everything is agreements. Everything is agreements because free will is a thing. And as you become a student of natural law, you realize that it's all based on free will. And any system that's going to last more than 5 minutes has to at least try to get your consent, even if they don't give you all the information. Like it's all consent driven. And so the financial systems, just like governmental systems, are all driven on consent. It's just they kind of hide behind being obligatory, or they kind of hide behind being authoritative. But really, you're doing is you're contracting. You're basically agreeing to enter into certain contracts, which ultimately you give up certain rights through doing those contracts. So to go back to the initial question, so what we need to do is first recognize that we need to know how banking works, because we're participating in that. So we can't continue to participate in a system without really knowing how it works. So one of the things we have to know is that the current banking system, and I'm going to refer mostly to the Federal Reserve banking system. I know that people in other countries may fall under that umbrella, or may not. Actually, I think most countries do now. There may be a very few that don't, or small societies, but I'm just going to assume that for relevance, that for most people, it's going to apply. So the Federal Reserve banking system is based on a system of laws or statutes. Not really law in the sense that it doesn't apply to us. It applies to commerce and corporations. It's called the Uniform Commercial Code, or the UCC. So it's a body of law or statute that basically explains how banking works, or banking is based on that. So newsflash, we already live in a world without money. The bankers took care of that between 1913 and 1933. So for people who are saying, when are we going to live in a world without money? So the first revelation is we already live in a world without money. Okay. Federal Reserve notes, what most people call US dollars, that's not money. That's currency. Okay. And this is the other thing that I learned, just to take a step back, not to add too many layers, but there's a lot to this and I get enthusiastic. So one of the things I learned through this new study, even more than previously, is pay attention to the meanings of words. Words have meaning and significance. And if we're going to have any kind of meaningful conversation, we want to really understand what each word means. So money is in the United States Constitution, for example, money is gold and silver coins, right? Why is it gold and silver coins? Because it's something tangible and physical. It has a value. Yes, you can't eat it, although I think some people do take tinctures with gold in them. It has healing properties. It never rusts, for example. Same thing with silver. It's got these, it's got these spiritual properties that go beyond just the physical. And I think that's part of the reason why gold and silver are considered money. So that's money. But if you go read a law dictionary like Black's Law, it says that notes, which are debt notes, are not money. And that's what Federal Reserve notes are. It's not money, because it's not even backed up by anything of value. The only thing it's backed up is because there's a code of law called the UCC that explains how it all works. So all Federal Reserve notes are instruments of debt, or evidences of a debt. More specifically, they're called negotiable instruments. They are documents that can be signed and can be traded and transferred ownership. In some cases, they can increase in value or produce aggregate value. But all it is saying that somebody agrees to pay somebody money, or somebody has promised to pay some money in the future at some point, but it's not actually money. So that's the first thing we got to wrap our head around, is that we're not working with money anymore. It's all currency or funds, negotiable instruments.
That's a hard concept just there for my brain to grasp onto, right? When I think about, the electronic funds that get put in my account, and then the way that, let's say, the government is expecting me to pay taxes on that, right? And and yet and I can do things, buy things with that currency, right? So what's the significance, I guess, of this distinction that it's not really money? There has to be a significance to that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of implications. And one of them is that you, meaning you, Leslie, you, Derek, or you who's watching this, and myself, any person, we actually can manufacture currency, and we often do without even realizing it. So every time that you sign a mortgage agreement or a loan contract, every time you use a credit card to make a payment, you're actually manufacturing new promissory notes, which is a negotiable instrument, just like a Federal Reserve note. So it's just a different type, it's a different manifestation, but it's the exact same thing in the code. It's no different than a dollar that somebody hands you. It may have a specific value. So what that means is so the first revelation is you're actually manufacturing currency all the time without even realizing it, right? And again, that's because that's the way the system works. Now, the next layer, to understand the next layer of the deception, we need to take a step back and remember something very important, is that we are all we're here for a reason. And this reality or this creation exists to some extent for our benefit, for learning and growing. But we're supposed to benefit. We're not here just to suffer. We're not supposed to be punished or slaves or anything ridiculous like that. I mean, we can end up in those circumstances when we don't learn something, but this is all for our benefit. So we are what are called beneficiaries. Okay. If you're familiar with trust law is a variation of, it's a form of contract law. It's very, very important to understand. We're beneficiaries. Now, when it comes to the banking system, this is something that the bankers put in place again they did it in part to enslave us, but they did it through trickery. And once you reveal the trick, the slavery ends. This is the part that has got me interested. So we're all beneficiaries. And what that means is when your parents, like, again, talking mostly about people who are in the US, maybe in other countries as well, when your parents sign a birth certificate, a corporation and trust is created in your name, and it has your name in all capital letters, right? That's a trust. A trust means that they're the beneficiary, and that happens to be you. Now, the way the banking system was set up is every time those trusts are created, they're funded with a certain amount of funds, currency, Federal Reserve notes, not money, because all they had to do is, flick their pen or their computer keyboard and it's fully funded. That's, if it were money, that wouldn't happen. They would have to literally take a pot of gold and put it in someone's account, right? But because we're dealing with negotiable instruments, you can literally create it out of nothing. So when shortly after you were born, when that birth certificate is signed and then a social security number is assigned, that's a trust. And that trust has enough funds in it. The way they set it up is it has enough funds to cover all debts, public and private. In other words, you don't owe money to anyone. You're taken care of, right? It's all to your benefit. But over time, those sneaky bankers, loving to keep people in debt slavery and to gain a benefit, they inverted it and made you think that you are the debtor and that they're the creditor. When no, you're the creditor. And the reason you're the creditor is every human being is a being of infinite value, and they know that. I heard a story recently that one guy's birth certificate was, birth certificates are traded in some market. We don't really even know because you and I are not normally involved in this. One guy's birth certificate was valued at $1 billion.
How could one person's value be more than another in that context?
Well, in the system, the value accumulates through your life actions. So there is a kind of a merit approach. Like if you accomplish certain things in your life or achieve certain things, this is not saying that this is not to diminish the intrinsic value, of course, but in this monetary game that everybody's participating in, even sometimes without realizing it, there is a sense of, think of the game Monopoly. I mean, there's a sense where people accumulate more. So yeah, that was just to give an example. But
is it listed anywhere? Like, is there a place where we have our name, in Social Security with a value amount of backed up,
you can go and look up, you might want to create a Treasury Direct account, which is free to create. And I know some people have looked up certain numbers, including their birth certificate number and their Social Security number, and they've been able to find certain bonds. I mean, I have not personally done a lot of that, but apparently people have been able to look up the values of certain documents associated with their identity. But again, here's the part that's really like an eye opener. Everybody's Social Security account is a trust account. And the estimates that I've heard is they start off with probably 9 figures, so $100 million, somewhere in that range. So you're never going to run out. So you as the beneficiary, you should never be for want in life. Okay. Now the problem is it's a trust. You can't go and stick your finger in the cookie jar. This is where they get everybody. You can't stick your finger in the cookie jar. There has to be a trustee. There has to be a trustee. A trustee is someone who is entrusted with administering. They don't own the assets, but they're supposed to act in your benefit, right? So every time you open a credit card or sign a mortgage or all these financial obligations, the people on the other side, they're the trustees, okay? And they're supposed to act in your benefit. And some of them will if you enforce that, and that's why I started teaching what I do. But most of them, they won't. Many of them don't even understand the system themselves because when people are brought into banking and finance, they're trained at a certain level, and they're probably not even trained to understand this the way we're talking about it.
Yeah, that seems to be one of the greatest barriers, is that compartmentalization. They need to know kind of teaching or the withholding of this knowledge. That's the biggest issue, right? Yeah. Yeah. Continue. This is fascinating.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's use the example of a credit card, because this is such a common scenario that I think a lot of people can relate to it. So a lot of people, and myself included, have had either bad associations or bad experiences with credit cards, or people have a very certain way of thinking about it. So how do most people think about credit cards? Based on my good behavior, based on my credit score and my background, is going to come along and say, you know what? We trust you, David. We're going to give you an account with a revolving line of credit that you can spend from up to a certain limit as long as you behave. And behavior in this case means you always you try to pay your bill on time, but if you don't, you're going to have to pay some interest. Okay, but if you're really good with your finances, we can keep that interest rate low, but you're still going to have to pay some interest, and you can't go over your limit. And if you miss a payment, you're going to get dinged and all this crazy stuff. So that's how most people think about the credit cards. And most people think, oh, I'm the borrower because I'm borrowing funds and I have to pay them back. And oh, isn't that bank so nice for giving me that line of credit? So what if I were to tell you that that is a completely incorrect way of understanding how credit cards actually work, right? What is the actual use of a credit card? So a credit card is an extension of credit, but whose credit is being extended? This is the first revelation. It's your credit. Again, there is a trust in your name. That trust is funded with credits. We call them credits because, again, it's not money. It's not gold coins. It's currency. Those are credits. So you are the creditor. So when people use this term, the creditor, who is the creditor? You are the creditor. And this makes sense because you're a human being, and we have an intrinsic value. and it's actually infinite. So you can't even really contain our value. But since we're playing a game of commerce, there has to be some, the game of commerce requires some limitations. So let's just say you have a trust fund. We call it the Sestake Trust because it's he who lives or she who lives, Sestake, right? It comes from the Sestake Vi Act from 1666. There's an interesting number there. Um, so, so when you get a credit card, what the bank is doing is it's extending your credit for your use as the beneficiary, because you're the beneficiaries. You can't go raid the account yourself. And in exchange for doing that, you're manufacturing securities. We'll talk about that in a second. So you're adding value, of which the bank may also trade. They may gain a benefit by earning interest on the values that you create. So they obviously need to get paid for their part of it. But ultimately, it's your credits. So when I said manufacturing securities, let me explain that. And I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at people here. I'm trying to explain it as the best I can, but it took me a while to wrap my head around this. So do you remember the old days before they even had the modern credit card systems where you literally had to like swipe over a piece of paper?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's probably hard to find those, although you could probably Google and find an example. That's a great example of literally manufacturing a collateral security or a promissory note. So every time you use your credit card, you're not using currency or funds from your own account, right? Not unlike a debit card or a check. You're not using your own funds. Again, there's an extension of credit. Okay. But in order to do that, you need to what? You need to promise to pay money in the future. So essentially you're signing and saying, I, David, upon treating my friends to lunch here at this restaurant, $100, I hereby promise to pay $100 in the future. And you sign your name. And signatures in commerce are very powerful. That's where all the power comes from when it comes to promissory notes and negotiable instruments. It's your signature that gives it power, linked to the trust, either directly or indirectly, right? Linked to the corporation, which is your name in all capital letters, because that's essentially who you are acting on behalf, right? You're signing on behalf of the trust.
And David, real quick, is the name in all caps, is that what people refer to as, your straw man?
Yeah, some people call it the straw man.
Gotcha.
I call it the Social Security Sestake Trust, to be specific. Some people call it the ens legis, which means a creature of law. The important thing to understand that it is a corporation, which means it's a dead entity. It cannot speak for itself, and it's not you. So when you receive something in the mail, all of your credit card statements, all of your bills, there might be a few exceptions, but 99% of them, they all come addressed to your name in all capital letters, right? That's not you. That's addressed to the corporation. It's really important to grasp that. So whenever you see a letter, and go check your mail, when you see a letter and it has your name in all capital letters, just know that that's addressed to the trust of which you are the beneficiary. But you can also be an authorized agent to act on behalf of the trust. So it's another hat that you can wear. You're not the trustee. You can't administer it, but you can authorize actions and you can grant actions. Okay. And you're actually the trustor because your birth and was essentially what created the trust. Okay. I know that's kind of wonky because you were barely a couple of days old when it was created, but you are the trustor. You're the creator of that trust.
So tricky.
Yeah.
I totally remember those days, man. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. No, yeah, no, this is awesome. Thanks for taking us on this trip. Continue, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. So you went to Applebee's or whatever your favorite restaurant is, you paid for lunch for everyone, and you're thinking, well, you're in the back of your mind, you're thinking, this is the debt slavery coming to mind. You're thinking in your mind, I didn't really gain any benefit here because ultimately I'm going to have to pay this back. Right? That may not even be a conscious thought, but somewhere in the back of your mind, that sinking realization Because
Yeah.
it's how you think about it, that it's not really a gain because sooner or later I have to pay this back.
With interest often. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
What if
threat
I
of,
were to,
a worsening credit score if I don't do it on time.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like a
it is,
burden almost.
yeah, it is true that you have to pay. We're going to define in a moment what payment is, but it is true. But what if I were to tell you that payment does not mean gifting your hard-earned currency to the bank? That's not
Tell
how.
more, because that sounds like a good news.
Yeah. Okay. So when you paid for lunch, what you probably didn't realize, but now I want everybody to know, is you just manufactured a promissory note for the face value of whatever the purchase was. And even in today's restaurants, people still sign them. It's just they're now digitally printed, but you still sign it. Okay. And it has the amount and it's somehow linked back to your account through there's different numbers on it. Even though your social security number doesn't appear directly on there, it can be linked back to the account. So it is linked to the trust. Okay. So that's what makes it a promissory note, having a dollar amount, like a face value, a promise to pay. And sometimes it's right on the language of this SID, I promise to pay. If you look, it's usually in fine print, your signature and a link back to the account. So that's what's required to make a promissory note. So a promissory note is a negotiable instrument. Okay, so it means it can be accepted for the value for its face value. It can be endorsed, it can be deposited, it can be traded as a security, it can be securitized. Okay, and that's exactly what the bank is doing. It's securitizing it, and then at the end of the month, well, in the meantime, when they receive those, they can trade them and earn interest on them. So they're getting a little bit of earnings there. And then at the end of the month, they send you a statement. Now, have you ever noticed that on your credit card statement, the balance due? It says balance due. That's correct, but it's always a positive number. It's never a negative number unless you've overpaid your account, which is pretty rare. Some people do that. But if you overpay your account, yes, it will be negative and then it will show as a credit. Okay. But when there's a balance, it's positive. Why is it a positive number? These things are not an accident. Accounting is not haphazard. In accounting, when you have a positive number, it means there is a positive balance. It means there's a balance of value. Something has been accumulated. What has been accumulated? The total value of the promissory notes that you manufactured through your purchases. Okay. So if you made $1,000 worth of promises to pay altogether and you get a statement that says $1,000, that is the balance that you have manufactured. So you literally created $1,000 of currency out of thin air just by promising to pay. Okay. And meantime, the bank on the back end was able to earn some interest on that, which is fine. I'm all for people earning. The part I'm not fine with is people not understanding that they are the creditor. And that's why I'm having, teaching this. So people sometimes ask, well, if that's true, if I've been duped, should I stop paying my credit cards? And my answer is no. But you need to pay using the proper definition of what it means to pay. And then, again, another layer of deception. So go back, so another thing they've done is now they have all these things about electronic statements instead of paper. You want to stop that, right? It's not about saving the environment, folks. Paper is important in this case because when you get a paper statement, that's where you get the check or the coupon that can be turned into a check. What is a check? A check is an unconditional order to pay a certain sum of money, which is a negotiable instrument. So notes and checks, negotiable instruments, all the same. It's just different. It's just two different forms of the same thing. Okay. So at the end of the month, when you get your credit card statement, what they're doing is they're saying, okay, Mr. Creditor, thank you for manufacturing $1,000 worth of securities. Are you ready to pay this? Like, what do you want to do with this account so we can zero out the balance? Right? So what is a payment? people are so afraid of this word because it means, they think it means raiding their bank account. That's not what payment means. Go get Black's Law dictionary or any relevant dictionary. I like to use Black's Law 4th edition to look up these words. Payment is performance of an agreement or fulfillment of an obligation, right? So in common law, going back to common law, we have contracts because we agree to do things, right? So we have contracts. So in those contracts, we agree to perform. Performance means fulfilling our obligations under that contract, right? So when you're asked to send payment, all they're asking you to do is to hold up your end of the contract, right? So what does that mean in the case of a credit card? Well, we do want to offset the account to zero, and they sent you a bill. A bill is a bill of exchange, which is a check, which is a negotiable instrument. Go look it up in the UCC. I'm not making this up. And you'll see that detachable part of your bill, it has even some routing numbers on it. And it says pay. Sometimes it even says pay to the order of, just like a check. It's a check. Okay. All you have to do is endorse that check properly and say who should be paid, right? You put an endorsement on the back of that check. You don't have to send your own check in. That would be sending it twice. They'd get paid twice. No purpose for that. They only need to get paid once. Send back the check. You may have to send instructions because people banks have not been honoring this. So we generally need to send instructions with these, especially the first time we're doing it. And you basically say to the effect, thank you very much for sending me a statement with the balance of the positive balance of securities that I manufactured using the credit card. Please transfer the balance per this check to the principal's account for offset and to balance the books. Thank you very much. And then you sign it. You send it off to the CEO of the company, of the bank, with the check endorsed. And what the bank is supposed to do is take your payment, because that's payment, offset transfer the securities to the principal's account, to whatever account to whatever account you specify, right?
Is that basically saying take this out of my initial credit, that fund that was created upon my birth? Is that what we're saying? Like, get the money from that? No.
No, that credit is simply to back the the account. That just means that you have credits. Now, if you sign a mortgage or like a fixed promissory note, like a loan, that they do redeem that immediately. So the way it works with a mortgage, it's a little different with revolving credit, because credit cards are revolving credit. So it works slightly differently. It's not a fixed amount. It's a limit, like you have a credit limit. But with a mortgage or a loan or a student loan or any of these kind of loans, what happens is when you sign that promissory note, which is the loan agreement, you've basically given them permission to exchange that for Federal Reserve notes. And so the value of that does come out of your trust, right? Or it's backed by the value of a trust. Actually, we don't really know on the back end how they move the numbers around, but the way it's supposed to work is your trust has enough credits in it to back the value of that note. And that's what gives it value. And that's why they, meaning the bank, can take that note once it's endorsed. And usually they're the ones that are endorsing it because, again, we don't really know what we're doing. So they endorse it. They make it payable to themselves, to their bank, right? Pay to the order of Wells Fargo Bank, They endorse it. They take it to the Federal Reserve window, which is where they can take these securities and exchange them for Federal Reserve notes of the same value. So if it's a loan for $15,000, including all the interest to be paid back, they're going to get $15,000 of Federal Reserve notes. So they're basically getting paid for the full lifetime value of the note immediately, or the next, whenever they present it. It might be a week or two later, but it's pretty much immediately. right? Whenever their next opportunity is. So they're getting paid. But with a credit card, it's a little different because they're not dispersing an amount. It's you're manufacturing securities as you go along, right? But they're still securities.
Right. So instead of sending a check or taking money out of my bank to pay off that, I'm endorsing that bill as a check with certain language that is then what? When they receive that, what happens?
Then they can accept it for the value that you endorsed it and then deposit it. So if you made it payable to the bank, they can deposit it, but it didn't come out of your bank account.
So where does it come out of, I guess, is the question I have.
Out of the ether.
So that's
Yeah,
crazy.
because when we create, because secure negotiable instruments are basically value that's just created out of nothing.
Yeah, which is what we're all operating in anyway, is this etheric realm of making up things. That's insane to me. It's really hard for me to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, when you signed that, have
Yeah.
you guys, have either of you signed a mortgage or a loan, any kind of loan?
I have, yeah.
Okay. When you signed that mortgage, whatever the loan contract was in that process, you were manufacturing a security, a collateral security, which is a negotiable instrument with the value, lifetime value of the mortgage. So, I mean, imagine that. I know when people are hearing this first time, they almost, some people, the biggest obstacle to grasping this is just to reject it. It's kind of similar to what happens with natural law and with anything that we come across, that there is this tendency, the ego wants to say, oh, there's no way that can be true. Because you've been so, this is why debt slavery is such a evil version of slavery. Like, I think it's the most evil
Yeah,
version
I
because it's so
agree.
insidious. It's like a mind virus. Because shackle and chain slavery, go watch that great movie, Jones Plantation, by the way. I just love that movie. At least it's so obvious in front of you. It's not as hidden. So the slave in that circumstance who has a certain level of self-respect and is willing to stand up for themselves, they're going to do it because they see that they're enslaved. The problem with this debt slavery is it's been so well hidden. This is why debt slavery is so evil. But it's also brilliant, again, if you think about what they've done. But the beautiful thing is, once you start to unpack it, then you can literally in a short period of time, you can start to free yourself from the shackles, because the same system has a correct usage.
Yeah. So I guess worries about it would be like, okay, I follow through with this protocol based on what I feel, I trust that this information that you're sharing is accurate, but the other people who I'm operating, who's, I'm interacting with, they don't understand it and they think I'm crazy and trying to just get one over on them and then create a hassle, right? Where I have to keep going and justifying what I'm doing. That's what I kind of worry about in this, is the amount of, it may be all true, but then we're interacting with people who are like, what is this? Sending it back to us, send us your money, clicking a button on a computer, giving us more debt. How do we work with that?
Sure. Well, first of all, at some level of these organizations, people know how it works, right? You can be sure that somebody in the banks, may not be the low level clerks, but somebody knows how it works. Second thing is, and this is why I started teaching, this is why I launched this new platform. As we know, even from natural law, although rights are conferred upon us, we still need to assert them. So this whole exercise is really about asserting your rights in the context of finance and banking. Okay, and so it's in a specific context, but it's the same concept. It's you're standing up for yourself, the principle of self-defense, right, in a mental, psychological state. However, there is a beautiful layer to it that takes us out of, there is no conflict. So remember the End the Fed that was like 15 years ago? This is not that, right? The Fed may end at some point, or it may not, or it may morph into something else. And I'm fine either way. And I'm only one person again, so I have no idea what's going to happen. But I'm not even trying to fight the Fed or end it. All I'm saying is use it in the correct sense. All I'm saying is, because that's all you're doing. And when you take that mindset, so what you need to do is, you know, we know that when we align with natural law, we have creation on our side. So it's the same thing here. It's just, scoped down to a very specific scope. So, but we're not creating any disputes. We're not filing lawsuits. We're not, arguing with anyone. All we're doing is conditionally accepting their offers. So when they send you a credit card statement, that's an offer, right? That's an offer. That's an offer to perform some action. So we're conditionally accepting it. We're saying, great, I've received your offer to make a payment, and here are the conditions of acceptance. I'm sending the payment back to you with the following instructions. Please transfer it according to this. And you can cite the relevant statutes in the UCC if you want to make it more clear why you're doing what you're doing. And you can even specify what will happen if they don't follow through. Because once you send that in, you made a payment and they know you did. And even if they tell you you didn't, they know you did, and they can actually take that check that you endorsed. It's now an instrument of value. They can earn money on it, or currency, I should say. They can continue to earn on it. And if they don't return it, they definitely accepted it.
So you said that it's in our better interest to have this in paper and not do electronic bank
100%.
interactions.
Stop those paperless billing, because they're just separating you from how it works.
Okay, that's
right.
key.
They're creating a layer of separation, and then you need to hold the tangible paper in your hands. It's in commerce and banking, it's all about documents and paper. That's the way it works. If you want to not participate in that system entirely, that's fine. But if you are, then use it the way it's supposed to be used. Right.
Quick question on that, because it came to mind when you mentioned it, like 20 minutes before, as far as being able to notice, like getting umpteen, letters in the mail per month or whatever from all these things. Isn't there the same equivalent of just all right, having it sent to an email and we can print those out and send them to them as well? Does that work as well, or
it will only work if the email version is exactly the same as the printed version? And even then, I would rather receive their version, because if they're cutting me a check and they may have certain codes or numbers on it, I want it to be an original.
okay, yeah,
I would just,
you
that's my
efficiently.
preference. Yeah. But if the electronic version is exactly the same, and if you print it out on a laser printer, it's literally exactly the same as though they sent it to you with all the same information, that's fine. You can do it that way. But they're trying to separate you from how it works. And they're trying to get you in the habit. Again, it's all another maxim of debt slavery is like, if you don't have it top of mind, you won't think about it. Right?
Well, and the ease that they're creating for us to do everything with a push of the button online, people like that. Let's do it quick, easy, boom, 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 don't think about it. But yet it's part of the trick, isn't it?
Exactly. So we live in a system where they're not using money, it's currency. We can manufacture currency, anybody can. So it's essentially infinite money, if you want to use that term. And it's backed by our value. So we are the security because we are beings of infinite value. They know this. Everybody knows this. We have infinite potential. And our labors, our creations, is the manifestation of that value. So that can be securitized. So we already are of value, right? And all the banking system is supposed to do is just recognize that and allow us to interact with each other through contracts and perform. So so nobody loses. In the scenario that I'm describing to you, the way it actually works, there are no losers, because the bankers will still be able to earn something from the securities that we are manufacturing. And everybody's participating in the same system. Everybody's already investing their labor. Everybody's already creating things. right? It's currently in place. It's just right now there's this divide, to use the term that you guys use. Like there's a divide where you have certain people who are in the know, usually a very small number of people, and then you have a very large number of people who just have no idea the game they're in, right? And they just keep feeding more and more. So as they're manufacturing securities, then they're also giving up their own securities that they, their hard-earned securities, right? The ones that they've earned through their labor. So all I'm saying is, you know, one of the reasons why I created this platform is I'm trying to create a movement. I mean, I'm part of a movement because there are other people that are already involved. I've obviously learned from other people. Just like with natural law, I mean, I learned from people, I wasn't the guy to come up with this. So I became part of, for example, the One Great Word Network. So what I'm trying to do now is to create a community around ending debt slavery specifically, and properly enforcing the way that commerce is supposed to work. So that's all I'm doing. I'm just trying to bring us back to fairness. I'm not trying to end anything or predict anything. I'm simply saying, since we're already using this system, let's use it the right way.
So that's great. I love this concept, and it's inspiring me and helped me to understand it better. So when you've brought up examples with credit card debt, like the revolving credit, and maybe a mortgage, those big things. This conditional acceptance, this process you're describing, does that apply to other situations as well, like taxes, or is there any implication for decisions around like licenses and things like that? Is it totally separate?
Oh no, it applies to everything, because all the things you mentioned are all offers to enter into a commercial contract. They're all voluntary. So getting a driver's license is voluntary. Putting plates on your car, which is essentially gifting your car to the state, that's voluntary. A marriage license, voluntary. A gun license is voluntary. Paying taxes is voluntary. Being considered a taxpayer is voluntary. So everything is voluntary. They're all contracts in commerce. So this is all happening at a level of commerce. So when I say commerce, the word law actually has an interesting acronym. So it stands for land, air, water. The actual order is air, land, water. So air is usually what's called trust law. It's usually often considered by many people to be the highest level of law or the highest jurisdiction. It's basically trust. If you think about it, the word trust refers to a legal entity, but it also refers to the kind of relationships that we have with each other, like where we can trust. Like you guys trusted me to show up today, for example. You didn't have a way to guarantee that I was going to show up. You weren't controlling my behavior, but you trusted that I was going to show up and fulfill my end of this contract, which is this show, right? So that's an example of a trust. Trusts are happening all the time. So it's the highest jurisdiction above all others, and that's the air. So it's the A in law. Then you have the land. That's common law. Okay. So common law is interactions between human beings, how we conduct each other in common law. And then you have the water, W, and that's the maritime law. That's commerce. That's why birthing with an E. You birth a ship. Ship goes out to sea. So it's birthing. So when you give birth to the Social Security, that's why they use that terminology. But it's also below our sovereignty. So our sovereignty is below natural law for obvious reasons, like we are subject to natural law, but commerce is below us. So, and our free will always trumps commerce. So to go back to your question, conditional acceptance is one of 4 ways to accept an offer. So in commerce, everything is an offer. Everything is an offer, right? Whatever documents or statements or summons or whatever, or even verbal, even your neighbor asks you to do something, that's an offer. Okay. So in common law, there are 4 ways to respond to an offer. You can accept the offer. So let's use a simple example. Let's say, hey guys, I want to treat you guys to lunch. Let's go out for lunch. I'm paying. That's an offer. Okay. So the first version would be like, you guys are like, let's do it. So it's kind of like an unconditional acceptance. Let's go. You just accept my offer. So now we have a contract, right? The second one is acquiescence. That would be kind of like where we're already out, and then I say I'm going to pay for lunch, and you guys just don't say anything. You don't protest, but you don't say anything. So you just acquiesce. You let me pay for it. Okay. Then you have dispute or discussion. So you might say, David, why do you want to buy us lunch? I don't get it. Like, what's your agenda? What's up? So that's discussion. That's where you get into a dispute. You're not just you're essentially rejecting it, but you're asking questions. And then the last one is conditional acceptance. And conditional acceptance would be, David, we'd be more than happy for you to treat us to lunch. You just have to buy us like the most expensive dish on the plate on the menu each, and we have to have dessert and a coffee. Right? So you're setting the conditions of acceptance. It's like you're negotiating. And because you've conditionally accepted my offer, we have a contract. The only way we can get out of that is, I might come back and say, well, I need to clarify, something. So when you conditionally accept an offer, the beautiful thing about it is there is no dispute, right? We stay out of court because the whole court system, as people know, even if they've never gone to court, just from watching, there is some truth to the representations on TV, or just talk to anyone who's ever gone to court. My parents went to divorce court, so they told me a lot about it. It's all about disputes and trying to create dishonor, because the person who goes into dishonor loses. That's how it works. They want you to fight. The person who fights the hardest, they're the ones that loses. Right? And that's why they call it court, because it's all a big game. It's like the tennis balls going back and forth. Right?
It creates a competitiveness, right? Competition. And there's always like a winner and a loser. And that's a false paradigm, really. Doesn't have to be.
It's very divisive. Again, going to this idea of dissolving a divide. Like, how can you dissolve a divide in court? It's all about dividing people.
Yeah, manufacturally. Yeah.
Like when you go into the court, you are probably already thinking whose side you're on. Think about that. Isn't that crazy? Like most people go into court, I would imagine, even jurors probably go in having at least, well, maybe not jurors, but most people who are spectators would go in already picking a side even and wanting their side to win. Insane.
Yeah, there's like contention in every level of this, with the debt, with the threat, right? Yep. The authority kind of idea of an authority over you. Yeah.
See, they're intimidating you. So part of what I do with this project is I offer consultations, and one of the things that you can learn to do, and anybody can learn to do this, when they send you these offers, you can tear them apart. Like a lot of times they're nonsense or they're contradictory. And then you just conditionally accept it. You say, I accept your offer on the condition that you explain to me why you're contradicting yourself. Or why you said the following that isn't true. Or why are you trying to get me to pay twice when you already got paid? Like but you're not disputing. You're just saying, hey, I'll pay this debt as long as you can prove to me that prove that we have a debt. Show that there's a contract where you signed and I signed in our handwriting mutually with mutual consent, full disclosure, and something value. Each of us offered up something valuable for that agreement. If you do that, I'll happily pay this debt. If not, here's what's going to happen. Here's what you agree to instead. And then we usually end up racking up some pretty juicy fines in the order of millions of dollars in order to push back. And again, we don't even have to go to court to enforce that, because we can use what's called a claim of lien. It's a commercial process where we basically put a lien on their property. And until that lien is cleared or settled, they can't do anything. It's like a clamp. It's like clamped down.
So this is done at the level of paperwork, basically, like before you get a letter in the mail that says you owe this money, or you have this court date or something like that, and then you're responding with certain words on the document to send back. So you're not just acquiescing and you're,
So what is acquiescing is dishonorable. It's not being honorable.
So then what's the difference between the dispute and the conditional acceptance, really? Because it sounds like, we're kind of disputing what they're saying, but you're framing it different.
No, we're accepting their offer as long as they agree to the conditions that we set.
Which is basically, though, like asking them to prove things or.
Sure. Because if they're
Right.
claiming a debt, it's natural that we would require them
Yeah.
to prove evidence of a debt.
Right. So the language that is recommended, there's a formula for that. Is that correct? Like, where does that come from? The language and the specificity of it.
Yeah, mostly it comes from practice. I've been studying this for about a year, and I learned from a couple of different mentors and teachers. Christopher Hauser is the one that I've probably learned the most from as far as this specific process. He's got a YouTube channel, and yeah, you just need to practice. The most important thing, though, is you don't want to just use a template. That's the biggest thing that I learned. You want to master this. When I finish writing a conditional acceptance letter and I send it, like, for me, it's a work of art. I read my own letter and I'm having all these emotional reactions. Like I feel good about it. I feel like I'm standing up for myself, which I am. And I feel good about what I've created. And I feel like um, I'm on the side of good because I'm on the side of objective morality, because I've gone through everything and made sure that I'm being honorable and I'm being truthful in everything. So I know I'm on the side of good. So that's what gives it force, right? That's the actual power behind it. So natural law is the force that's behind all this. It's just a specific way to go about enforcing your rights or standing up for your rights. Asserting is the right word, asserting your rights. So yes, it is done largely on paper. It's mostly about paper because, again, it's a commercial, it's all being done in the realm of commerce. And it has more effect when it's in a written contract. In common law, you can have a verbal contract. Of course, you can do that. But these things have much more effect when they're in writing and when they have witnesses. And then you don't need to go to court again because the entire process can be done on paper. And even in some cases, if you decide to file a lawsuit in like a claim, you may not even have to show up in court because you built your entire case on the conditional acceptance, which is a contract. So they've already agreed to everything. All you need to do is have a smart enough judge read it and really comprehend what's happened, and they'll be like, done, accepted. Okay, no need to appear in court. There may be a small number of cases where you might have to, but as long as you know that you're in the right, you can learn how to navigate that experience. But largely, obviously, you want to stay out of court because you just don't want to get into disputes. This is not about disputes.
So can you share an example or two of some real life outcomes for you, like how it went?
Yep. So I'm still going through this process, but I'll share a few from myself and then a few from one of my mentors or several of my mentors. So in my case, I've sent off a number of conditional acceptance letters to debt collectors, third-party debt collectors, and they've stopped all communications with me. But they haven't canceled it hasn't dropped off my credit report yet. So what I've done with one of them is I sent off, this is kind of an advanced topic, but I've already, in the conditional acceptance, I already included the lien. Let me back up for a second. So in the conditional acceptance that I sent to this debt collector, the gist of it was I'll agree to pay this debt as long as you can prove that we have a debt contract between us, as individuals, because in common law, contracts are always between individuals. There's full disclosure of all terms, no deception. There's lawful consideration, meaning every party gave up something, and there's free will consent. So if they can prove that we have a contract that fulfills all three of those, I will happily pay it. Of course, they can't do that because no such contract exists. So I gave them a couple other terms. I said they can pay me a penalty. Wasn't that much. It was like $9,300. And then they can wipe out my, any negative reporting on my credit report. And then a couple of other things. And then I said, if you you have 30 days to do this. And if you don't agree, then each of the recipients is indebted to me for $9,300,000, right? In gold and silver coin. But if you don't have gold and silver coin, I will accept Federal Reserve notes as payment. Okay. And I also put in the contract that they agree that I can file a claim of lien and collect those funds. And so I've literally just sent off to the US Treasury about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I sent my first contract to the Treasury. And what they do is they use the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, to collect. That's the collection agency. So they go and collect on these liens, and then they get to keep 35% for being the collector. And then it's sent back basically as a tax refund for whatever the balance is. So I've already started that process. Chris Hauser, who's had success with this, has been mentoring me on it. He and some people in his network have already gotten disbursement of these funds from the IRS. And he actually has a video on his channel where he shows one of the letters that they got from the IRS with like a refund of like $54 million, something like that, which is from one of these lien filings. And someone in his network ended their prison sentence early for wrongful arrest. I mean, we're talking victimless crimes, of course, not hard crimes, paper crimes, if you want to call it that, basically. And Chris also got his child support dismissed because his ex-wife wasn't even taking care of the kids. I think she basically deposited them with some other relative. But she was claiming the child support. So he got that dismissed through conditional acceptance. Brandon Joe Williams, who's another guy I learned from, he got like $177,000 of debt from Amex dismissed using conditional acceptance, and another debt collector as well for like $13,000, I think it was. So massive results. I'm fairly early in this process, but for me, it's already a win. Every time I send a CA letter, it's a win because I stood up for myself, right? I stood up for myself, and I'm fine if they don't. When I get no response back, but I know they received it because they signed for it because it's sent certified mail. Like for me, that's a win because I know they got it, and we have a contract.
It seems important to me, that aspect of kind of valuing ourselves enough to stand up as an equal, seeing ourselves as an equal, no, not a lower being. Like, I think this whole kind of debt experience has us psychologically feeling less than or small or shamed.
Yep.
And I think what you're
We're all debt
describing,
slaves. Yeah. Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
mindset.
like they're
hearing that.
demeaning. Yeah. It's a demeaning experience. And
For sure.
in often in relation to or in context to just like busting our asses to make a living, I'm this part of like overcoming the fear of conflict, the fear of standing up for oneself against sort of this big force of financial institutions or government that people are very frightened of. My
it's with
father.
individuals. It's with individuals. That's what I keep teaching people. All these contracts are with the individuals. Yes, sometimes it's with the CEO, and you always go to the top of whatever organization you're dealing with, right? But you're absolutely right, Letty. It is confrontational, and it has to be to some degree. Even though we're not disputing, we're still confronting. We're still coming up to face with something. Right.
Yeah, that's a good distinction, because it does involve this courage to confront, to stand up in your value and be willing to do something that's not conforming. It's non-conforming.
Right.
My father, and there's like the mental piece we're up against. I'm always thinking about this example from my own father. He and my mom were visiting me from out of state, and he had this panic all of a sudden, like that he was late on paying his credit card. And I was kind of at that point, I'd like, Dad, it's okay. If you're late a day, it's just, a late fee. It's not worth panicking over. You don't have to be so stressed out. And he looked at me and he said, I would rather commit suicide than be late on my payment. Like there was that much sense of
Insane.
that is what's right to do. And you're, like, whoa, I was like in shock by that.
Yeah, that's a manifestation of this debt slavery and the social engineering. All right, unfortunately. And you recognize that. And it's heartbreaking when we have family members that we realize that are so deeply into it. And I have a lot of family members that it can be a bit heartbreaking to come to grips with that. But just to help the benefit, let's talk about credit scores for a second, because I really want to set the record straight on this, right? Because I struggled with this for the longest time.
Yeah.
So
very connected to our identity, right?
Yep.
You're a good person if you have a good credit score, right?
Yep. So what is a credit score? What is the true purpose of a credit score? He's like, don't keep
it's
us in suspense,
manipulation.
David.
It's mind control.
When I do my workshops, I
fear-based
ask
mind control.
Yeah. When I do
I've
my
been in
workshops,
France, they ain't got that, but yeah, go for it, man.
when I do my live workshops, I always ask these questions and just shut up and let people answer before I answer them, because I want I want people to think about it. So, hey, buddy, you got a dog here. I'm taking care of someone's dog here, but I don't know if he'll come on camera or not. You want to come up? Come on up. Yeah, he doesn't want to come. Okay. So, a credit score is a proprietary system that's run by private for-profit corporations. It's created by, hey there, buddy, you coming up? Oh, you're too big to come up. All right, maybe not. It's created by private for-profit corporations for one purpose only: social engineering, the engineering of behavior, right? As evidenced by the unfortunate example from your family, Leslie, and from all of us probably, and from me, I mean, even myself for many years. So I'm not excluding myself from this. That's the only purpose of a credit score. Not only that, but there is no legal basis for credit scores being connected to the actual credit you get. Why? Because you are the creditor, right? You are the creditor. As we already discussed, you are the creditor, and you are the beneficiary of a trust that is already fully funded, right? And you are also a banker in the sense that you can manufacture securities. Every time you make a promise to pay, you're manufacturing new securities. Okay. You have that ability to do that. So credit scores are completely irrelevant. In fact, all of the factors that they use to calculate credit score are complete nonsense. We can knock all of them down. Making payments. Most people are actually getting a higher score for not making a payment, because they're improperly paying, because they're sending gifts of Federal Reserve notes. That's not payment. And so what the bank has to do on the back end is they have to go clean up the mess, and actually they endorse the note themselves. That's why they ask you to send it back with your payment, right? So they're getting it anyway. It's just they're the ones that are endorsing it. Okay, so they're cleaning up the mess. So you're not making payments, so you really should have a lower score. What's the other one? Credit utilization. That's irrelevant, because again, you have millions of dollars in your trust, so there's no, and you can manufacture securities to the end of time, right? There's no limit. The amount of credit, yeah. I mean, ultimately, the way the trust works is you're really supposed to just get what you need to live, right? I mean, we're not supposed to necessarily go out and each of us buy a Boeing 787 just because we have a trust account. I mean,
hey, just a $2 million house. That's cool,
yeah.
right? We can make it happen. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, 2 million, that's doable, Derek. I would do that.
I want my own island,
Yeah. All you need is a trustee who agrees that that's in your best interest. That's really all you need, is a trustee to say, yep, I think it's in Derek's best interest to have a $2 million mansion, for Leslie a private island, however you guys want to set it up, and done and done, right?
Yeah, that's right, David. We'll hit you up later for that, man. But yeah.
It brings up a whole nother question of sort of like
so many.
Yeah, a whole nother topic. We'll hold off on that.
Sure. I mean, we can go anywhere you want with this, guys.
Yeah, Leslie, what's on your mind? Where do you want
Well,
to go?
I kind of went off on a tangent in my mind about, the whole moral implication of just everyone demanding islands to live on for themselves, because there is other aspects to this of understanding how we are interconnected, and that there's more affected than ourselves, right, as we're operating on our own behalf. Yeah, but yet, we're so far from that, because like, look at Derek and I are like, we would probably be pretty humble, in our desires, or to some extent, like,
I think most
um,
people would be.
yeah,
Here's how I look at it. If natural law is just allowed to express fully in human society, and just without all these deceptions. I mean, natural law is already in effect, but if it was just kind of openly embraced, if the way we interacted was more honorable in general, everything would work out for the best. It really is designed for maximum benefit. The non-psychopathic mind, which is the majority of people naturally, is not going to be naturally controlling. It's going to be naturally again, there is dissolving the divide, unifying the masculine and feminine aspects, unifying unity consciousness. The human being in unity consciousness, some of them may want an island, but not all of them are going to want an island. There's not going to be like this disjointed disparity. It's all going to balance out. People are going to want what they want, need what they need. People are going to respect each other's boundaries and limits. There's going to be plenty to go around. In fact, it'll be so much better. I'm one of the reasons why I'm so motivated by this it's going to be so much better than it is now, by orders of magnitude. Right. So I don't see a scenario where just because where a lot of people realize that we can just manufacture a currency, which is what we're already doing, that all of a sudden everybody's going to become so greedy and like rush to grab an island. I don't see that happening. I see things going more into balance. There will always be small outliers and a few people that try to control everything, but in a world where natural law is fully implemented, they won't be able to create that much damage. So I think even then it would be much more harmonious. So I see this all as a good thing. I mean, again, this whole creation, going back to what I said earlier, is for our benefit. So why would we not want to maximize that? All we have to do, the rules are very simple. Just respect natural law.
yeah.
It's really that simple.
What you're describing really helps to see this like a set of rules that have been overlaid into our world, like
Yeah.
and that we've accepted, that we bought into and have agreed to, and that these contracts that we're signing are just part of, like you said, our agreement to this trickery. And it's our ignorance that's keeping us from the true abundance, right, available to all of us.
Yep, it's none other than the ignorance. It's been the same problem all along. It's the ignorance, apathy, and laziness. And so, and a deeper level, if we go deeper, as we've learned, it has to do with a lack of self-love, right? When we truly love and respect ourselves at a deep level, and even with all of our faults, even though we're not quote unquote perfect, but when we gain that higher level of self-love, it makes us naturally stand up for ourselves and naturally stop stop dealing with bullshit, or not allowing ourselves to be deceived. So of course we would want to do that. And that's again why I wouldn't have been able to do anything I'm doing now if I hadn't studied natural law first and hadn't gone through what I've gone through. But I think based on that, that's why I always infuse what I'm teaching, that it's all built on a foundation of core principles. And that's why it's so effective. And that's why it can be so effective. And that's why you've already won, even if you just sent your letter, even before anything happens, you've already stepped into your power to a much higher level than at any point. And, I want to congratulate anybody who's done that, or who goes through that process, because it just means you're learning to stand up for yourself.
It's like a chess game where you're really a serious player,
Yep.
and seeing yourself as worthy a player as everyone else on the team, or everyone else playing.
And knowing the
You're
rules of the game, not trying to play chess without knowing the rules.
exactly. Yes. So that's a big part of this. And I think is what intimidates people, especially the way that the language has been created. It's foreign feeling, it's abstract, it's
Sure.
intimidating. Yeah. So how might you, what might you say to people who have that fear, that intimidation of the words and the rules?
Yeah, well, the remedy starts with education. So that's why I started to do these live workshops. Aside from the fact that I really enjoyed the context of, teaching in a live setting. So the first step is just start to educate. So whether it's watching some videos, whether coming to a workshop, you know, take it easy. You're not gonna get upgraded in one day. It's not like somebody plugs you in and like all the knowledge just gets plugged in. Start the process. Just start walking down the path, right? If someone's afraid, hey, I get it. If you've been afraid your whole life, you're not gonna be able to turn it off like a switch, right? That's a good thing. It means you're not psychopathic. It means you have conscience, right? It means you have feelings. So celebrate that. And then take just enough courage to take the first step, right? And then in the case of people who want to work with me, the first step is very easy. You sign up for a free workshop. I'm not charging anything for people to attend, but you have to pay with your time and attention. It is a 3-hour workshop. Like I said, everybody stayed till the end for the first one. So that was yesterday. So it's going to be worth it. I can tell you, people had some great feedback from the experience. But yeah, just take that first step. I mean, this conversation for you guys is kind of like a first step too, because like now you know more than you did when we started. And, probably these ideas are going to start percolating. And then you will know what's the next step for you, right? You'll know what's the right thing to do next.
Yeah. Have you had other resistances that you could identify and then share your feedback?
In myself or in other
From
people?
other people or yourself. I mean, I'm sure like
Yeah.
you're getting feedback from people about it, like it doesn't work, or I tried this and, or whatever, what have you heard?
Yeah. Well, for the people who attended my workshop, there was there was a little bit of, you could tell there was a little bit of fear and anxiety, but not much. I would say in general, uh, it seems like a lot of people get stopped because they want like proof that it's going to work for them, like immediate proof. Um, it's kind of like this left brain, very left brain centered way of looking at it. Like, let's debate this. I need some hard, concrete evidence. Otherwise, it doesn't work. How do I know it's going to work for me? Then there's the fear layer, because people are so used to these, like as you described it, Leslie, like these big monolithic organizations, and they haven't grasped the fact that those organizations consist of people, human beings, living people. And when you do in this process, you're only interacting with living men and women. We're not doing anything. We're referencing the corporations, but all the interactions are with the individuals. Okay. And it's important to remember that those people are human beings. And if you're saying something that's true to them and you're just asking them to acknowledge what's true, what's scary about that? If that's scary to you, then, and I get it, for some people, even that's scary. I get it. I'm being compassionate. But if that's scary for you, then I want to push back on you that's probably where you need to do the work. Because what are you going to do if you confront someone in like a family member or in your school or something, and the same thing happens, like they're doing something is wrong, or they're saying something is not true? How do you deal with that? Do you not say something? And if you don't, what do
I
you
think
expect
that's
to
a
happen? What do you expect
I
to
think
happen?
that's actually a rampant problem. I've been thinking about this a lot, that many people are very uncomfortable with basic level conflict, resolution
Yeah.
and communication. People will avoid it. And I think the distancing that's being created around, we can deal with people from afar or in disguise, or you know, is making it easier for people to avoid being assertive. It's a lost skill.
The social media effect and whatever on the internet, people can say whatever and be held unaccountable really easily
Yeah.
these days, you know? Yeah.
Most trolls are online. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because very few
Yeah.
people would have the balls to go and troll in person. You know.
Yeah, as a therapist, you know, counselor, I work with a lot of people, and there's such a trend of people pleasing and conflict avoidance, of always wanting, you know, to make people happy, to keep things smooth and easy. For many, many people, that's how they're living their lives. So this idea of standing up and proposing something that's non-conventional, you know, would be terrifying. So I think you're right that that is the level that many people need to start with, is just working with their own confidence around standing up for what's right and true. And the more that we can do that, then you're going to have, you know, more willingness probably to gain the knowledge, right? And then study that, have your backup through whatever these, like you said, these Black's Law Dictionary, or you have the ICC, whatever that the initials
The
were,
UCC. Yeah.
UCC, you know, is sort of your knowledge as backup, right? To help guide the language. So I'm sure that people need coaching and some support to do this process.
Yeah, this is at the deeper level. This is healing. Um, there's a deep level of healing, and like I said, assertion of the self, standing up for oneself, psychological. It's a lot of it is mental and psychological self-defense. Obviously, much more than say physical self-defense, which is equally, if not more important, because again, the form of slavery that we're under is occurring from the mental plane. I mean, everything ultimately is emanating from the mental plane because we live in a mental universe. But specifically, what's going on is you're being enslaved through your mindset. So, on the deeper level, what I'm doing is it's not just so people can get a financial remedy. I mean, that's part of it. Obviously, I want us to stop suffering financially, but the deeper level is to help people to stand up for themselves. And as more and more people do that, then it has a cascading positive impact. First of all, in the communities, in, you know, not even with the banks and financial institutions, that also comes, but it's a life skill. I mean, I'm positioning this as a life skill, and it can be used in other contexts. It can be used in a verbal context as well. When you're speaking with someone, you can, if someone says, "I want you to do this," I'll say, "I want you to wear a mask." Okay, I'll conditionally accept your offer to wear a mask under the condition you can prove to me that I don't have the right to breathe clean air at all times, and or that somehow my breathing clean air is infringing on your rights. If you can prove that to me, then sure, I'll wear a mask. Otherwise, I won't. Right. So we could deal with the COVID restrictions in this way. We can deal with conflicts in our communities, in families. So there's many contexts. The financial context is pressing and is prominent because it's a big deal, but it's not the only context.
Yeah, I appreciate those examples.
Yeah, and you bring up some great context. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think the difference could be if the majority of people were to embrace, you know, become educated on these ideas and embody these the action here? What's the difference that could make compared to right now? It's sort of a dabbling few here and there.
Yep. So there's a couple ways to look at that. In terms of the specifics of dealing with banks and credit cards and loan contracts and the specific scenarios, it's going to be much easier as more people do this. It's going to be much easier to enforce these conditional acceptance contracts. It's going to become, and also it's going to bring to light in a more public setting what's going on. So it's going to become more common knowledge. Just the knowledge of the deception is going to become more visible, which is itself a healing process. And if we can't see what's wrong, if we can't see the actual wound or see or feel it, then we don't have our attention on it to do something about it. So at the very least, it's going to start to create more healing. But I think it's also going to mean that more people are going to start to free themselves. And then as people free themselves, they are going to have the pulling up effect of wanting to pull other people up with them, right? And they will also have financial means to, for example, donate more to people whose causes they care about. Like, wouldn't it be great? Like, wouldn't you love to be able to go to everyone, for example, in the One Great Network and just send them a donation of some amount and not have to worry about the amount because you were able to do it, and then they're all benefiting from that, instead of having to worry about, can I afford to donate? So imagine the good that we can do. And I've already thought about it, and one of the top things that I plan to do, and if when I start tapping into more currency, is to start making donations to people whose work I really respect, because I would want the same, and I want them to be successful. So imagine these kind of changes. But I think literally we start to see a world where, going back to my original premise, where it is a much more natural reflection of natural law, and we've built communities around mutual respect. People don't take shit from each other. People stand up for themselves. And ironically, although some people would claim it would be more less safe, I think it would actually be a safer world. I think it would be a world where much more honor and many more possibilities. So I think it opens up. It really is like, if there's a paradise level waiting to be unlocked, I think that it brings us much closer to that level.
Yeah, it seems like it could eliminate the social caste system, the social classes, in a lot of ways, where there's really no one who's completely impoverished. This idea, what you said is that we're all, if we have a birth certificate and a social security, we all theoretically have enough to meet our needs. So we shouldn't be hungry. We shouldn't be homeless. That there would be, hopefully, if everyone is educated and knows this from the beginning, we're all living with adequate means. Would that be true, do you think? Could that happen?
Yeah, because think about it. What's your real currency? Because we already know that negotiable instruments, like, we can manufacture them, infinitely. So they're just documents. So what is the real currency in that case? What do you guys think?
Say the question again, because I want to make sure I understand it.
Yeah. So knowing that we already live in a world without money, or where we're operating with currency, which is instruments of debt, which we can just manufacture endlessly. So it's kind of like an endless supply of money, if you want to put it that way. So knowing that that's true, what do you think is the real currency that human beings, that we as human beings can have, that really makes a difference in the world?
Well, it has to be our
energy, our effort, what we manifest, what we put forth towards everything.
I mean, our care is ultimately, what drives, I guess, the sharing of resources, because this is where I'm struggling, because there's, at some point, if everyone sort of recognizes this currency is made out of air, we're going to come down to having to live on concrete resources eventually.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can continue to trade in commerce just like we have been. I mean, all the constituents are there. So I put forth that the real currency is our internally, it's obviously our consciousness, our level of consciousness, but externally it's our reputation.
Oh,
Again, going back to trust. Who do you trust? Is this person trustworthy?
The
What's their
handshake.
track record? Yeah. Reputation. If this person is trustworthy, money is irrelevant. I know I can count on them, right? They're going to do their part because they've proven to be trustworthy. Like, if you are trustworthy, that's all you need to get by in a world without money. In fact, it was said in, I don't know if you guys like to watch shows, but Seth MacFarlane made a show called The Orville, which is kind of like a semi-cheesy takeoff on Star Trek, like a variation. And they said it, some of the main characters said it over and over again when they were trying to explain to these primitive worlds, how do they live without money? And I think the commander, I can't remember the name of the character, but she would say, well, in the future, reputation is our currency. Right. And I just said, nailed it. That's it.
That's interesting. And that does come down to morality and natural law, ultimately.
Yep.
Yeah.
So internally, being internally in
That's
unity
correct, Chris. Love
consciousness, yeah, being undivided internally, then manifests externally as a reliable person, a trustworthy, reliable, and person who's a human being who's going to contribute and ask in fairness. Like, you're going to want something in return, but everything's going to be in balance, right? It's not going to be out of proportion. So imagine if more people in the world operated that way. Is the amount of money that we have, is that really relevant in that equation? We already have all the resources. We're on the earth. We have the earth. We have the resources. We have the finite amount of resources, depending on how you look at it. We're already using those resources anyway. It's just we're paying for them with currency. So if we took currency out of the equation, but everybody's, people are acting fairly and people are reputable, I don't see an issue with that.
Right. So let's say, that we have masses of people who are gleaning this information. They're out there asserting this. I could see that there's institutions or existing structures that are going to push back, right? Who and what would be threatened by the majority of people asserting these rights? What could we expect?
Yeah, the psychopaths, the narcissists, the demons manifested in human form, like the ones who are just here but they're always going to be here because we're learning from them. Like, we're not going to be able to get rid of those individuals. They're here for a reason. But now we just, in context, we no longer allow our rights to be trampled. And I think they're always in the minority. That's just how I look at it. I think that the good human being is always in the majority and always has been. It's just we've been trampled on so much because the bad guys are so good at what they're doing, right? But this starts to balance the equation, right? It's not that it completely eliminates that. That would be, a quote unquote utopia, which we already agree doesn't exist. But I think the paradise that I'm aiming for is where everything is much more in balance, and the occasional imbalances, we just deal with them. We just deal with them as they come up, usually on a very individual level. So imagine if psychopaths who normally, and narcissists and these crazy, these certain minded people who now have disproportionate amount of power because we give up our power. Imagine if they're just relegated to their own individual sphere. I mean, how much damage could one person cause in that equation, right? So, and over time, the effect of these institutions starts to wane. Whether they completely collapse or whether they just fade away, I don't know the answer to that.
Well, as you know, you said that we're dealing with individuals within these institutions.
Yep.
So the more individuals that learn this, the more they're going to detach, hopefully,
Yeah.
from the systems as well. And then that power diminishes because the rule followers are leaving their jobs, hopefully.
Yeah, you can influence
Yeah.
people around you, family
Mhm.
members, colleagues, peers, people who may be working in corporations. If you yourself are working currently in a corporation, you can start to make a change from within, the Trojan horse, as it were. And yeah, I mean, it's all happening from the mental plane. So it's like I wouldn't call it a mind virus. It's like a reprogramming or a new mental construct or a new unlocking of a new level in mind is happening. But as it spreads, similar to a virus in that regard, but a positive way, it spreads, and then it can only have a positive cumulative effect, right? It just goes back to the law of freedom. As more people unlock that level, it's got to have a cumulative effect. So that's how I look at it in context to this, and why I'm so motivated to teach as many people as possible, because I only see the upside of it.
I love it. I love your enthusiasm and the clarity, in which you can share these concepts. Yeah. So I'm winding down in my available time. I'm wondering, Derek, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, these things tread on a lot. I mean, I'm sure as you've seen in your research and all that, and like delving in, like looking through comments and stuff on social media, people that look into admiral law, maritime law, Black's law, and all these things. It seems like a lot of people feel or they give off the impression that they've just kind of been like black-pilled and jaded by that whole thing. Like, as we mentioned before, just kind of like powerless, is like, oh yeah, we're debt slaves, and like there's this, stuff going on, and with mosquitoes flying around and shit. But so how can we kind of uh like how can you explain to people and appeal to people, and also, like, for me, I'm interested in knowing of how we can, bridge this gap and kind of synthesize this whole, the true man of who we really are, true woman, man, whoever you are, as opposed to our straw man, the all caps and all that, and how we can use that to our advantage, but still keep our sovereignty, but have that, because it, like, you definitely, talked about it quite a bit, but as far as like quick little nuts and bolts, if you could, yeah.
Yeah, the first level is just to recognize who you really are. And the approach that I take is very empowering. There's no doom and gloom by me. There's no black pilling. Um, I always that's why I say, if you have any interest at all in this topic, just come to a workshop. It's free to attend. You'll get a good dose of all of it. This conversation has maybe been a taste of that, but it's obviously very specific. And I think everybody who attended my workshop, I got a lot of great feedback. Nobody left feeling disempowered. Everybody left feeling like, in fact, people were more motivated. So I think when you get access to the right knowledge and the right information and in the right context, then you're going to see that there's two sides to everything. So yeah, there is a negative way of looking at all of it. And certainly being deceived and being a debt slave is objectively not a good thing. Like, it's objectively a bad situation. And people have been objectively suffering. I'm not diminishing that in any way. However, just because it's been that way until now doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Right. And that's maybe where I break from the doom and gloomers, because it's almost like they're so addicted to their negative experience that they just want to, in some ways they just perpetuate it. But it's all about your state of mind. It's all about your state of mind. So my approach is very different. My approach is unifying. My approach is empowering. It's very practical. It's not just theory. It's all about bringing it into practice. And I would say, if you have even just an ounce of hope or an ounce of true desire to be more, to experience more, to fulfill yourself, to be more, to live better, even just a small bit of motivation, then just take action on that and come join a workshop.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
I wanted to do it
agree.
yesterday. I was too caught up on too many things, man.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
that was really cool. I'm glad it was successful, especially on your birthday. So yeah, bon anniversaire, mon frère. And yeah, wow, yeah, definitely want to get in contact with you in the future. And Leslie, did you want to say something to what he just said? I got another question on deck, but yeah.
No, go.
No. Okay, yeah, no. So yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you breaking down so much and kind of like bring it back to what we started with. Obviously, I was kind of alluding to like so much of how people get. I wasn't trying to make this topic revolve around the difference between common law and natural law. Although I've been really interested in like breaking that down with people, because, but I like how you put it into perspective, because it kind of gives that reference. And Leslie, how you broke it down into tiers. You have like man's law, and then common law, then natural law, and like, yeah, natural law, spiritual law, nature, neter, which means spirit in Commission, right? So yeah, it's the universal laws of this reality, how it's constructed, the dynamics that control our behavior, the cause and effect, causality, if you will, karmic law, and yada yada. And then once we, observe that and stuff, I see how people have tried to implement that into common law with those, universal axioms of truth, acknowledged. to a good degree, but obviously there, distortions, yada yada, and then like we got Mann's law, which is like an overlay or redundancy of some things that you see. So it's like almost like a cosmic game of telephone in a sense, and yeah, it's just about kind of maneuvering through the matrix as best we can, not being part of the scam, and anything with that, my man.
Awesome. Yeah, we're in a sense, because we're all interacting here, we are playing games in commerce, and we're interacting, and there's a certain level of complexity. Um, Natural law, the way I look at it, is it's just the underlying fabric of how it works at the deepest level. It's even sometimes hard to even put it into words. It's just like a knowing, like this is the objective nature. Like we live in a mental universe. There are consequences, and when we generally align with um, not causing harm and being objectively moral, then things get better cumulatively for all of us. So there's just like simple ways of putting it. But then in common law and in Mann's law, commerce, the UCC is complicated, but UCC has a spiritual basis. All law is spiritual. This is something I had to realize. Like even the UCC, I know that could be a hard pill to swallow because there are people that like hate on the UCC because it is the foundation of the banking system. But it wouldn't work if it didn't have a spiritual basis. And there are actually principles that are in operation that come directly from natural law. They just manifest in terms of specifics. So I may start to get into that in some of my workshops as well. I've been studying that. But I think once you understand that, it also takes away the need to fight against it. It's more like, well, how do I make this game work, in harmony? How can I participate in a way that's more harmonious? Because we are here to enjoy, and everybody has something unique to contribute. That's why we have commerce, because some people are good at one thing, some people are good at something else. That's not natural law per se. That's just the uniqueness of individuals, right? But we want to allow that a maximum expression. So, I mean, everything's coming from nature, but we want to make this an enjoyable experience so that we can continue to evolve, unlock greater and greater levels. So, I think it is worthwhile, and I think it's enjoyable. I don't think it's getting lost in the weeds at all, and I feel that it's very empowering. And so that's why I'm, doubling down on this. And this is probably
Yeah.
for the foreseeable future. This is going to be, I'm going to be all in on this.
Yeah. I think it's an avenue of hope, to take where we are at in reality in this world to a better place, an avenue out of some of the slavery that we've been participating in and claiming, our rights to live with more abundance and freedom. I really am feeling more inspired to learn more about it and activate it. Yeah, thank you, David.
Amazing.
Yeah. So anything that you haven't said that you want to make sure you say before we finish up today? Any final points or things you want to plug?
Yeah, I'll just mention that in addition to the website, I mean, I'm essentially building a community. And so I want to invite people to participate. So I created a Telegram group. There's a mailing list. I'd love for people to participate. There's a lot of ways to get involved. The first thing to do, if you haven't, is just obviously come to one of the workshops. I'm going to start doing them probably every week, as long as there's enough attendance. The bar is pretty low. I would say if I have at least 5 people or more for a workshop, then we're going to go ahead. I have a new YouTube channel that you can find through the website or through the Telegram. I'm probably going to launch a membership for people who want like access to certain resources, just kind of an ongoing membership. Yeah. So, I mean, in a way, more than anything, I'm trying to build a little community that hopefully will grow over time, and we will be able to support each other. So it's not just everybody out there doing stuff on their own. So I want to invite you to come check it out, be a part of the community. I'm going to continue to be a part of the other communities. I'm probably going to post some of my videos on the One Great Work Network and just continue to, coalesce and kind of, hopefully join and cross collaborate. And it's one of the reasons why I appreciate you guys having me on the show, because I feel like it's a great cross collaboration as well.
Yeah, we're really glad to have you. Yeah,
Yeah.
David, and thank you for shedding light on this topic. I do think it's very important, and I'm following, how it's almost a natural progression from the deep study of natural law to then the solution building in the world. What do we do with this knowledge in a practical way to make our lives better? Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for doing all that deep research, and I feel very trusting really of you in terms of your process of seeking knowledge and being very accountable yourself. So yeah, I recommend everyone to check out David Greenberg's work. Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys. And like I said, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's just allowed me to express certain things and continue to even learn, even as I'm going through this process.
Hell yeah, it's a beautiful process when it unravels that way, and the fact that we're all aligned towards the divine and just for the win-win in this reality. So yeah, it's wonderful. I really appreciate so many encouraging methods of how we can go about these things. So yeah, thanks again, David.
Absolutely. My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, our pleasure. We'll look
Yeah,
forward
honor is
to
ours to
meeting
you.
the next time. Take care.
Thanks for
Take care.
watching
All
again.
right. Yeah. Bye.